Hi, everybody. It's Sadie here and Danielle,
Hi, guys.
and we're here to talk about staying organized or getting organized as peer support specialists entering the workforce. So it's my experience that whether I've been doing peer support for a long time or I'm just starting to do peer support, that I need to check in about my organization from time to time. And when I first started doing peer support, there was a learning curve. So there were ways that other people stayed organized that did not work for me, and ways that some people stayed organized that really, really helped me out, especially in getting acclimated to my new job. So there's a few things that we want to remember. The first thing, the first and most important thing, is to create enough time to meet with the people we're supporting. So in our training, we call those people participants. So that's how we'll be referring to them today. But some people call them consumers, clients, individuals in service. Really, it's up to you. The point is that we're not our diagnosis. We're people that are being supported by peer support specialists. So um, that is the most important thing to me, is making sure that I have enough time to meet with the people that I'm supposed to be meeting with. Sometimes I have gotten demands from supervisors to do extra documentation or to do things around the office that have created conflict with me being able to meet people where they're at when they need to be meted, whatever. um, so that's the first and most important thing. So Danielle, how many peer support participants are on your roster?
So, as a peer support specialist, you can see 25 individuals. So, I have 25 individuals on my peer support roster.
So not everybody needs to be met with every week. Some people will want to be met with more than once a week. So figuring that out, getting to know your people and figuring out how often do these people want to be met with, and creating at least an hour time slot for each person. Sometimes have had people on my roster that just wanted a morning check-in call and then a meeting every other week. So I just make sure that I have time in the morning to call and check in with those people. So sometimes we meet with people in the office, sometimes we meet with people in groups, and sometimes we meet with people when they're staying downtown, living outside. And so I know I need to create more time to meet with the people that are living outside than I do to meet with the people that are coming to the office, because I may need to track them down, find them. We might want to go someplace warm if it's cold and snowy like it is today. And so I really try to think about those things when I'm creating my schedule.
So, and then when you're meeting with individuals, you want to think about documentation. So, after you've met with an individual, we always want to document what we did and what was talked about. And so we want to make sure that we're scheduling enough time within our schedule not only meet with individuals, but also have time for documentation. That could look like half an hour after you've met with the individual. That could look like an hour at the end of your week. But you want to make sure that you are scheduling some time in your schedule to be able to provide documentation of meeting with those individuals.
And some agencies require you to document within 24 hours. So a lot of the peer support specialists that work in my agency schedule an hour each day so that they don't go outside of compliance within that 24 hours.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our agency and also meeting the needs of the people that we're serving as well. So just looking at your schedule and figuring out what time's the best time for you to do documentation and making sure that you're following those guidelines for your agency. The other thing is how often are you meeting with your supervisor? So Sadie, how often do you meet with your supervisor?
So my supervisor and I have a scheduled meeting once a week, but we usually end up meeting every other week. But I always have an hour blocked out to meet with him every Monday at 2 o'clock. That's our standing time. So if we don't meet, I know that I can catch up on documentation or do other things during that time, but I never schedule anything else during that time.
So it sounds like Sadie has a recurring time that she meets with her supervisor on the same day and the same time so that she automatically blocks that off on her schedule. And that's really important. When we start filling up our schedules, we want to make sure that we're making enough time to meet the needs of the people we're serving, but also meet with our supervisor and go through our rosters with them and really, talk about anything that you need to talk about in that meeting with your supervisor.
And when we talk about supervision, we'll have more videos about that, but that looks a lot different at different agencies. A lot of times your supervisor will be a clinician, so that'll be more of reviewing your roster and talking about your timesheet and time off and stuff like that, which is different than a peer co-reflection.
Yeah, for sure. So then we talk about clinical consultation, and I think Sadie's going to speak on that a little bit.
Yep, so that supervision I was talking about is also called clinical consultation. The state of Nebraska and Medicaid for the state of Nebraska requires that we meet with a clinical consultant at least once a month or once every 2 weeks for Medicaid. And so we want to make sure that we're reviewing our roster and meeting with this clinical supervisor about what we're working on with people. Are they still benefiting from peer support? Are they still meeting us? Do they have extra needs? Would they benefit from taking part in therapy now or getting case management? So that time is important, and we have to schedule that. So when do you plan to meet with the clinical consultant at your agency?
Yeah, so at our agency, we do staffing. So we meet like once every month or twice every month to kind of go over, we sit in with the clinician and we go over our rosters, talk about what people are doing. Are they showing up for group? Are they benefiting, like Sadie said, from peer support? And really gives us a time to kind of look at what is the best steps moving forward and working as a team. So when you're meeting with that clinician as well, is you get to talk about it from a peer support aspect as well as a clinical aspect and kind of look at moving forward with that individual.
Yeah. And then we think about team meetings. So a lot of teams are comprised of more than just peer support specialists. Sometimes you might be the only peer support specialist on your team. A lot of residential programs will have one peer support specialist and 5 therapists, 1 case manager, and up to 20 technicians. So those kinds of teams usually meet once a week. Outpatient teams usually meet at least once a month. Outpatient teams usually meet once a month, and those will be like a large meeting talking about any changes within the agency or within the outpatient clinic. Assertive community treatment teams usually meet every day because that's a really high level of outpatient care, and so they review everybody that they see every day. I know the ACT team in Lincoln meets before lunch every day. So those team meetings are important for us to attend, even if it seems like sometimes they're talking about things that don't apply to our job. It's important for us to be aware of what's going on in our team and to be an active member and to be an advocate, because sometimes those team meetings can result in somebody being discharged or somebody being admitted again, and we want to be a part of that conversation.
Definitely. So part of those team meetings is a lot of times are recurring. So making sure that on our schedule we have that blocked out so that we're staying organized and we're continuing to kind of meet the needs of our agency as well as our professional jobs as well. And then also it's like the chain of the command, right? And so something that you really want to know about is who's your supervisor and who's their supervisor. So when we're talking about chain of command, we really want to think about like, are we going to our supervisor and are we getting our needs met with our supervisor? And if we're not, then what do we do after that? And I think it's really important that you have that open communication with your supervisor and knowing that you can go and talk to her or him and get your problems or anything that you need talked about, figured out there, but also knowing like what else happens within your agency, like who's that person's supervisor and who's that person's supervisor so that you can kind of understand the way things are done. I think Sadie could probably talk a little bit about that as well, working at Centerpoint and being a supervisor.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about the place I work is that all the supervisors have each other's backs. But my supervisor is generally available whenever I need him. If he doesn't respond to a text message or an email, I know that his supervisor is also available to me, so I can send her a message or an email. And there's a lot of other supervisors in our agency that support each other. So if one of us is out, the other one can probably answer a question.
So I think it's important that everybody has an understanding of how the agency runs, and also when you're gone or on vacation, that there's another person to kind of step in and fill that role for you. So then we talk about meals. Are you scheduling your meals? Meals are super important. We've got to take care of ourselves, right? And so I think it's really important that when we look at our schedule on a daily basis, that we schedule time to take breaks for snacks or eat lunch or whatever your healthy eating routine is that we're making time for that. It's super important. I always take 15 minutes in the morning, a half an hour at lunch, and then 15 minutes in the afternoon to really take time for myself. So that gives me a chance to go outside and walk around. If it's nice out, it gives me a time to just kind of put stuff down and really kind of refocus and kind of re-energize myself to get back to work for the day. But I think it's really important that we're scheduling times for our meals. Eating is very important for our brains to stay focused and have healthy activity. So I think it's really important that when we're looking at our schedule that we're scheduling time for food or meals.
Yep. Yeah, and it's important that you advocate for that within your job. If you're working 8 hours, it's important to talk to your supervisor if they're expecting that you don't have time to eat. If you're like me, you have a medical condition, I have type 1 diabetes, it's really important that I have time to eat lunch during the day or I'm going to crash mid-afternoon, and that's not good for anybody. So along that line, we talk about self-care also. And self-care is something that a lot of people talk about. It can be hard to pin down, what is self-care? Well, really doing anything for yourself that helps you stay well throughout the day is your self-care at work. So like Danielle talked about, scheduling 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon to go take a walk. Sometimes for me, I'm an introvert. Self-care is shutting my door and turning on the talking heads and just listening to some music for a little bit and not answering my phone. But that helps me recharge and be a better employee and a better peer support and more present with people outside of that 15 minutes. We also want to talk about organization-wide meetings. So those are less frequent, but those are really important to be a part of. I know when Danielle and I worked together as peer support, we often missed our organization-wide meetings because we were placing the needs of our participants above going to those meetings. But then a few weeks later, something would happen and we would say, what are they talking about? And it's like, well, they talked about that at the all-staff meeting, but you weren't there because you were out doing what you consider to be more important. And to me, meeting people where they're at and being there for them is more important, but it is important for us to participate in those organization-wide meetings so that we have an understanding of what's going on and any changes that might affect our job. So how often does your organization meet as a whole, Danielle?
We get together quarterly, so they have quarterly all-staff meetings where they get together and they kind of do announcements and some other things that are going on within the agency, but they also have presenters. They have people come in and talk about education stuff, and I think it's really important for us to get to know the employees that we're working with as well, so that it's a great way to connect with other people within your agency, find out about the other programs that your agency is offering, so that if you're working with an individual and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I just heard about this cool resource that we have within our agency, so I think it's really important that you attend those meetings, like Sadie said, and just kind of build a community inside of your agency. I think it's really important that, like, for team building and just all around health of the agency is to get to know each other and build a community within that agency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now we have peer co-reflection. Do you want to talk about co-reflection a little bit?
Yeah, so I know within Nebraska, peer co-reflection is done at your region. So there's 6 regions in Nebraska, and each region holds a co-reflection. But it's a great time for peers in your community to get together and talk about successes, talk about what you're doing as a peer support to take care of yourself, and it really focuses on the peer support itself, and really finding out, education. It can be about education as well, I think. You talk about the core competencies of peer support, and you really get to wrap yourself around the peer support in the room and also talk about the education piece as well. I know Sadie does one within her agency. Do you want to speak on that one too, for sure?
Yeah, so like I said, a lot of the peer support specialists that I work with are the only peer support specialists on their team. And so where in peer support, we talk about our lived experience, stuff we're struggling with, stuff we're working on every day, like it's nothing. It might not be appropriate for us to talk to a therapist that we work with about that. It might make them uncomfortable and feel like we're seeking therapy from them when really we're just being ourselves and like talking about like peer support, so that is an important aspect of it. They get to come and say, what they're working on, what they're struggling with, what successes they've had. They also get to come together and talk about a specific competency, which I call like co-reflection is like the bumpers for the bowling alley that is peer support, because sometimes we can drift, and especially if we're hanging out with clinicians all the time, we can start to think and talk like clinicians. And that's not helpful for our role. So being around other peer support and reinforcing those competencies helps us stay focused on what our job is and what we're actually trying to do, and get ideas from other peer support about how we can problem solve maybe difficult relationships that we have.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way for you to feel supported as a peer support too. Mm-hmm. Having other peer support in the room with you to actually talk about some things that you're going through within your job or the successes that you have, it's a great way to celebrate.
Yeah.
I feel, for sure.
So, okay.
So the other thing want to talk about is like organization, like in your life as well, right? And so I know Sadie and I were talking about like the different planners we have and the different calendars we have, and it's like we have one for our lives and we have one for work, and are you reviewing those together? So I think it's really important. For me, I do it daily. So every morning I get together and I look at everything I have to do in my life and everything I have to do within my job, and so that I can make sure that my daily schedule is on point and I can get everything done that I need to get done. But I also think that like scheduling self-care outside of work in my daily life schedule is really important. And so after work, I always set 30 minutes aside and 30 minutes in the morning to spend time doing something that I enjoy, because I feel like it benefits me in my role as a peer support specialist and also in my life. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important that when you're scheduling and you're trying to stay organized, to have a schedule for your life, and then have a schedule for your work, and then combine those. I think it's really important that we really kind of make the two in line with each other so that we can be accomplishing everything that we need to as busy working people.
Yeah.
And peer support specialists as well.
Yeah. And, I take notes from RAP. So I have, a daily plan that helps me stay well throughout the day, throughout the week. And so I have to do different things throughout the week to stay well. I attend meetings, and I meet with support people that I have. I go to my doctor's appointments. I take my medication, and I have medications that require me to take one when I wake up and then wait 45 minutes and take another one. And so making sure that I have time for that and that I'm scheduling that is really important. There's also work events that happen, and if I don't have a personal schedule and a work schedule and compare those on Sunday nights, then I might end up conflicting like a friend date with somebody and a work event, and that's not good for anybody either. So I personally use FamCal as a personal app for my personal calendar. It has shopping lists on it, and I can share it with my husband, so we can know what we've got personally going on with each other, so that we don't schedule things for each other that overlap. And then I compare that with my Outlook and Credible calendars for work on Sunday nights to make sure that nothing's overlapping. Another important piece is to take time for self-care, and that's different than time to recharge. So, like I said, I'm an introvert. I need time to recharge every Tuesday night. I don't do anything. I stay home. I don't schedule anything. I create space and time for myself to recharge. The self-care piece is more of like the doctor's appointments, the meetings, the working out, the eating healthy, that kind of thing, for me, is what's the difference between self-care and recharge time. Peer support specialists have a really intense work life, and so the recharge time is really, really important. What kind of personal calendars do you use, Danielle?
Yeah, so I have a calendar app. It's called Life 360. It's also something that I can share with my family, as well as then I have a personal calendar too, a paper one. I'm really good with paper. I tend to take notes in my planner, and I'm able to transfer all of that kind of into planner lingo. But I also, so there's so many apps out there. There's paper calendars, there's calendars within your email. I think it's really important that if you haven't tried one, I know personally when I first started working, I didn't have one, and it was like, oh, I had all this free time to do whatever I needed to do. And then when work happened, it was like, oh, wait a minute, like things started crossing over. So it was like very important for me to really make it a habit to use a calendar and use an app to better fit my needs when I started working. So I think it's really important just to try to stay organized, and really, if you have struggles with that, reach out to your supervisor. They'll help you. Really look to somebody to kind of help figure out what's best going to fit you in staying organized.
Yeah, and if you need any or have any tips or need any tips about what kind of planners to use or what apps to use, we welcome you to leave comments below about what planners or apps that you use that help you to stay organized, how you organize your documentation and meeting with people and self-care and all of those things. Please just comment below so that we can learn from each other. And have a great day.
Thanks, guys.